I'm a kid that grew up in a broken home. I'm a kid that was diagnosed with bone cancer at 14 years old. And I was also an individual that shamed their disability after a downhill mountain bike accident that resulted in my left leg being amputated above the knee. All of us can look back on our life and say, why did that shit have to happen? I don't think we'll ever get an answer, but what we can do is give purpose and reason to why those things happened, and that's through the power of service and through the power of giving back to others.
What do you do when you come out as LGBTQ and love the outdoors? What do you do when you see the outdoor space ruled by older white cis men and desire a diverse community of outdoor lovers? Accept it, change it, create it. I am Justin Yoder, and this is LGBT Outdoors. Hey everyone, it's Justin with another episode of the LGBT Outdoors podcast. Again, we are so excited to be having you with us tonight. I am joined with Patrick Thompson.
Hey everybody.
And JC Rienton.
Hello.
That was a long pause.
Hi guys.
And we are going to have an awesome episode that I think is going to be full of laughter and a great time. So I'm glad that you're all tuning in tonight. But before we jump in with our guest, I want to be able to talk a little bit about one of the aspects of LGBT Outdoors that a lot of you may not know about, which is the visibility survey. Patrick, do you want to describe the visibility survey?
Yeah, so it's the LGBT Outdoors Visibility Survey, LOVS, or LOVES for short, because we like being cute and clever like that. But it's just kind of checking the pulse of our community to see where in the outdoor space that people have felt unwelcome or experienced harassment, just so that we can take that actual information to companies, for example, in the outdoor space, and like, hey, like our people don't feel welcome. What can we do together to create a more inclusive environment in your stores, in your parks, and really just trying to, like I said, just check the temperature of how things are going. Whether it's something in the past or hopefully nothing in 2023, but we know that it still happens, and being able to tell those stories to the people in the corporate boardrooms really helps to humanize the situation and hopefully bring about some change. So yeah, it's all online. It doesn't take very long. It's on our website, lgbtoutdoors.com. I forget the exact link, but I'm sure Justin can tell you.
It's actually just right in the main menu. So as soon as you go to our website, you'll see it in the main menu at the title. But like Patrick said, the whole goal with it is to be able to raise awareness about what our community kind of faces in outdoors when it comes to challenges, but also to let the corporate world know, like, hey, we are spending a lot of money on outdoor shit, and so like you need to pay attention to us, and be able to help make products that are geared towards our community and especially the trans community, and we want to be able to make a difference in that space. So we need as many people as possible to take that survey, whether you like the outdoors or not. As long as you identify as LGBTQ+, we need people to take that survey. So get your friends to take it, share it on your Facebook, Instagram, all the things, let people know about it. And it's just at lgbtoutdoors.com. And you could go, you'll see it right on our homepage, the visibility survey, take the survey. So we would appreciate that very much.
Do it.
All right.
I took it. Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say I took it several months ago. And it was actually a lot simpler than I thought it would. And like, you could just take it and be straightforward with it, or you could also like provide more details and like really share a story if you want to on some of the more open-ended questions. So yeah, it was very easy from what I remember taking it. months ago. Yeah.
The more data that we have, the more accurate of a picture that we can paint to decision makers. I did a very, very light skim of the data about 6 months ago. And some of it was encouraging. Some of it was really troubling, if I'm being really honest. And the more people that will provide their voice to this, the greater impact that we can have.
Definitely. All right. Well, I'm excited for our guest today. We have been chatting a little bit before we started recording, and I am really looking forward to this. So our guest today is an athlete, and he is also an activist for LGBTQ plus people, athletes with disabilities. And so we're really excited to welcome Kyle Stepp to the podcast today. So how's it going, Kyle?
What's going on, y'all? JC, Justin, Patrick, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah,
glad you're here too.
Yeah, we're excited
awesome.
too.
We're really excited. I forget where I first learned about you. Probably Instagram, maybe. And just like, who is this guy and what's going on? Like, and soon like realized you're involved with the Oath as well, I believe. Doing stuff with them, which is awesome.
Yeah, so it's been really awesome. So I recently been a part of supporting the team and really focusing on like how do we educate individuals and communities and organizations around the barriers to access for folk with disabilities. Patty and I became really good friends over the past few months because of a mutual friend, Vasu, who is a phenomenal, badass skier, but also ally for our community. And Vasu was like, okay, so you and Patty, so when is this happening? How do I make this happen? I was like, and it's like, it's always been Vasu's like joke with things. He's like, so I'm just going to make this happen. Like you and Patty are just going to get married. But Patty, I'm calling this out, hot take. But no, like Patty's become just like a beautiful mentor and someone I look up to in my life because someone that is so unapologetic about who they are in our space.
Yeah.
And then like this beautiful intersectionality because Vasu, as much as like brother needs to come to our community and I wish he was a part of our community, he is just a beautiful ally. And so Vasu
we love our allies.
No, hell yeah. And I think like Vasu is someone like the reason why I am in the outdoor space I'm in, especially, right after my accident, the first thing I returned back to was skiing. And what I love about Instagram, you can just like slide into people's DMs. I'm like, you're a badass and I want to learn from you. And so this like beautiful intersectionality of like Vasu and Patty is how like I've started diving into the space of educating others around the barriers to access that disabled folk have, but also this intersectionality that I live in of being an openly gay athlete, but also someone that comes from a non-traditional home. And so just like this beautiful intersectionality, and that's how I became really good friends with Patty and Vasu, which ultimately allowed me to do some awesome collaborations with the team at the Oath.
That's awesome. So nice. I love all that. And I want to like kind of circle back around to some of that because maybe a lot of our listeners might be wondering who exactly is Kyle Stepp and why is he on the podcast? So let's start with who you are and share some of your story. And like, we would love to be able to know kind of like what it was like, how you grew up, where you grew up, that kind of thing. As well as maybe some of your coming out story, and then we can lead up into the accident and what led you to who you are today.
Yeah. Justin, like I always say that like I'm a product of the communities that cared about me the most when I needed them the most. And my heart, my passion is to give back to those communities so that I hope that others have a little bit easier journey than I had. I think so many individuals like there's not a single person that's not listening to this that hasn't gone through their fair shit in life. And I think through that, with survival comes privilege, and with privilege comes a responsibility and a responsibility to help others. And, you know, I'm a kid that grew up in a broken home. I'm a kid that was diagnosed with bone cancer at 14 years old. I'm a kid that grew up in a conservative home where I was so deathly afraid to come out because I was afraid of not being accepted and not loved and not welcomed. And I was also an individual that shamed their disability for over a decade and eventually had to step into that space more than ever after a downhill mountain bike accident that resulted in my left leg being amputated above the knee. And through, you know, for me, my short 29 years of life, I've found like service and giving back and advocacy as my way to develop understanding and reason for why things happen, but also gives me a purpose behind things. Because all of us can look back on our life and say, why did that shit have to happen? Like, why? And we'll never get, I don't think we'll ever get an answer, but we can also, what we can do is give purpose and reason to why those things happen. And that's through the power of service and through the power of giving back to others.
Dang.
And then we could just wrap up the podcast with that.
Yeah, I'm like, no comment.
Holy cow.
That's great.
I love all of that.
Preach.
Oh, what happened?
You have to figure out like what your dog got into. All right, so hot take. I have the most beautiful little golden. He's like my best friend. But I'm like, what the fuck did you find? And I'm like, and it's like, I'm over here just pouring out my heart and soul. And I'm like, it sounds like you're choking in the background. And so I'm like, for those that are listening, and I hope this is on here, I swear that I'm a good dog dad. And I swear, like, but here's the thing. Where she's ended up in the vet. And I'm like, sister, one, why did you find this? How did you find this? And like, Kyle, why are you a dumbass and leaves this shit out? And so tonight, thank God it is not ibuprofen. And she has to go. So it's just a blue little bottle cap. So
like a bottle cap? Okay,
yeah.
Nice.
You know, sorry to go on this. Like, it is, there's just always moments when I've like been in intense situations and I'm like, sister gets into something. And okay, here we are. So apologize.
Yeah. No, like we've got two younger pups, and like it's constantly like, what do you have in your mouth? Like, like
usually an
It's
acorn.
always curious.
or a sock or a, so
That's funny.
we get it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So now that you poured your heart and soul out and the dog interrupted us, get back on there.
It's like you're always on that, like you're always in that moment where you're like professing your love or your like deep vulnerable side of you, and it's just that awkward moment. You're like, okay, there's silence, and then something bad usually happens, and you're like hoping it's not worse. And so this time it's just my dog getting into shit. So here we are.
All right. Well, if it gets into any more shit, just let us know. We can stop or whatever we need to do. But I would love to dive into your childhood a little bit more, because like you were diagnosed with bone cancer at very early age, 14, I believe it was. But what was your life like up until then? What was your connection to the outdoors, or where did your connection to the outdoors come about?
Yeah. You know, Justin, I've been, you know, so often we're asked those questions about like our childhood, and I think every single one of us have a different story and like what happens. And for me, I look back on my childhood, and unfortunately, like it wasn't the most beautiful times. And I think that's what's hard. Like as I'm stepping into my space and being, as I'm at my age and like really accepting who I am, there's a lot of times where I've gone back and forth around what I share of part of my story. And I say that because I think there's such a unique, it's been a while since I've been able to like be really vulnerable about this. And I think so often there's not a single one of us that hasn't been through so trauma or shit. And I think our relationship with our trauma and our hardship and our pain changes over time. And it changes based upon our season that we're in. And, you know, there's been a part of me that honors my past. Like I'm a kid that grew up in boys' homes. I was a kid that grew up in domestic violence shelters, that grew up without his parents. And I think if you were to ask me this question even a couple of years ago, I would probably trauma dump and just share all of it. But I think I've been honoring the past because it makes me who I am. There's a part of it, like there's a part of me that understands like it's painful. It is, like it sucks. Like, but it's also given me this beautiful perspective to love the things that I wish had not happened. I love the things that wish not happened because I love deeper. I look at the world so differently than I did before. My relationships with friends, my perspective on the world, my drive and my passion, and the core of why I do what I do. But Justin, when you ask that question, it's been a while since it struck a chord. The reason why is because I think I'm stepping into this space of just honoring the time, not necessarily having to. I think when you talk to someone that has gone through really traumatic things, they'll go down this list of all of the shit and they will describe it. And I think you start stepping into a space where you honor it, you recognize it, but it's not necessarily all of you, but it's always a part of who you are. And so I think, Justin, I grew up without a traditional mom or dad for most of my childhood. There was a part of my childhood they were there, and there were some really good times where, you know, my mom and dad, but unfortunately they fell to addiction, and that I think so many of us have experienced in our own homes and our own families. But what's amazing is I was raised by the community. You know, it's really awesome because there was individuals that came into my life over the course of my childhood that were, whether they were my parents in the boys' homes, they were my foster parents, they were my grandparents, they were, I grew up in the church. They were my small group leaders. And I had some really positive people that played a role to show me how beautiful life can be. But as a kid, the one outlet I always had was the outdoors. And it's interesting as you go to process, like, especially going to therapy is the best thing ever. Like, I tell everyone that, like, if you haven't, brother, sister, friend, go find yourself someone to talk to, because it allows you to process things. But I noticed a correlation for where I found my most outlet, like my biggest outlet, was being in the outdoors and through physical activity and movement. Because that was the one space, even as a little kid, when shit hit the fan, I left the house and I was on my bike and I wouldn't come back home until the street lights came on. Mm-hmm. Because that's where I felt free. That's where I felt like I belonged. And that is rippled into every time I've gone through something in life for some reason, and somehow the outdoors was where I found healing and I found belonging and I found where I could unlock my true self.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that, because like I never thought about me getting out of the house as a way to kind of like escape things that were going on in the house. Like, my childhood wasn't necessarily bad, but I can look at times at my childhood where I was like, I would much rather be in the outdoors than be in my home right now. And I think that's always been kind of an escape for me. But also I just love being outdoors, you know. Like, that's a big part of it too, right? Yeah. But the therapy that can come through just going out and watching a sunrise, you know, or just going out on a walk, just riding your bike, the healing that can do in itself is such a powerful thing that we love to try to emphasize, because a lot of our community is just like, the outdoors isn't for me. Like, a lot of people in our community would say gay people don't like the outdoors, and it's like, well, that's not true.
Justin, but do you think I'm curious from your thoughts, is that a deeper rooted challenge or insecurity that has prevented someone from loving the outdoors? Like, is there something, like, I think about our community, and is there something that prevented them from that? Because I think about, about being in elementary school, and being shamed for parts of my personality that, like, remember being on the playground in elementary school and being called faggot and being called a little gay boy. And like at that point, I was probably starting to question, but I was so afraid. So I then associated myself to not feel like I belong in that space because there was shame and discrimination towards you're on the playground with your friends playing sports or you're doing activities outside. And due to the unfortunate hypermasculinity around in cultures in the outdoors and in sports, you felt shame. And so that as a little kid, you felt like you didn't belong in that space. I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah, I think that could be a big part of it. I never thought of it that way before because, like, I mean, you think about most of us, I feel like I'm accurate in saying this. Correct me. Any of you can correct me if you feel like I'm wrong. But I feel like whenever you're coming out, for the most part, we're terrified because we're not exactly sure what our parents, family, friends are going to say or do. No matter what age we are, whether it's our late teens, 20s, 30s, whatever it is, a lot of times whenever we do, then we end up going to the gay bars because it's like, where else can we find other people like us? And it's like that culture tells us that being queer looks this way. It looks like we're shopping. It looks like we're partying, we're going to the bars, we're, drinking, doing all this stuff. We're living in the city. We don't live in the country, all this stuff that I feel like it tells us this is what it's supposed to look like to be a part of the LGBTQ community. But I do think that possibly shame could be part of it too, because it's like, for decades, the outdoor industry has been run by cis white straight men who say, this is what the outdoors is. And if you're here, you're not going to fit in, and you could be ashamed of that.
But I think it goes down to sense of belonging. Like, why would we go to the bars? Because we belong. Like, there's people that embrace all of you and make you feel like you're whole. And I think about just back to that childhood of, in those moments in the outdoors, let's say it's, I think being outside on the grass field, playing sports with my friends and being pushed away because there's parts of me that they want to shame. Because I think it's fear and lack of understanding. And like, I think there's lots of intersectionalities and an unfortunate, like, I don't think we teach masculinity in a healthy way. But I think what it goes down to, you described a situation where you're going to have the outlet to the bars and the clubs and those spaces because that's where you belong. Like, the reason why you feel that is because your community embraces you. But if you step into the space of the outdoors, are you embraced fully? And I think that's what you all are doing, is where you can be in that space and you're loved fully and you're embraced. Yeah. I think deep down, that's all we want, is to belong more than anything.
I'm glad that you recognize that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. Is when somebody's coming out, you go to a gay bar, for all intents and purposes, like you said, you're embraced, you're welcomed, regardless of who you are. But nobody has really modeled that for the outdoor space, for queer people. And a lot of times it just takes somebody to say, like, tap you on your shoulder, like, hey, you are actually welcome here. We're so just not used to assuming our safety and our inclusion, or at least for me, like as a queer person, like walking into any church, for example, I can't assume. Anytime I go and work with a new group of people, I can't assume that, like, if I talk about my husband, who I love dearly, that they're going to be cool with it. So, like, we kind of have that wall up. And so without somebody modeling, like, inclusion directly in front of you and inviting you, for me, it becomes like a little bit more challenging to step into whatever that space may be.
This episode of the LGBT Outdoors podcast is brought to you by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where you can experience the wonder beneath the waves and celebrate your connection to the ocean. Join Monterey Bay Aquarium in advocating for a healthy ocean. Together, we can tackle climate change and stop plastic pollutions at the source. Sign up for the Ocean Action email to learn how you can protect the oceans that connect us all at montereybayaquarium.org/act. Take your indoors outdoors with Spacious Skies Campgrounds, a collection of 15 campgrounds and RV parks spanning the eastern United States. Each location is unique, but all offer the perfect escape to the great outdoors if you're looking to spend quality time with your friends and family or simply need a scenic home base for your nearby adventures. Choose from RV sites, cabins, yurts, retro RV rentals, or tent sites, and enjoy on-site amenities that offer convenience, creature comforts, and fun. Visit spaciousskiescampgrounds.com for more information and easy online booking. We welcome and invite all campers to camp on with Spacious Skies Campgrounds.
Yeah, okay, so like coming from personal experience, I mean, and as we know, like these safe spaces, these communities, you kind of discover them in your adult life. Like coming from experience when I was a child, I never thought of the outdoors as the safe space where I would isolate and internalize and like process things. I would go to my room. I would go somewhere where I would be alone, like that I know no one would bully me. I thought of the outdoor space as more of like, look, I don't want another situation where I would run into someone who would also like shame me for who I am. So, and yeah, like growing up, you wouldn't see anything like either in media or in your friends that like, hey, for gay people, it's a great place to be. So I love that you found that as like an outlet, Kyle, like early on, because for me, in that age, I would be so fearful to be outside and like think maybe just with my personality, like I would think, oh, like I wouldn't want to get like run into someone else who would like, do something bad. But yeah, I mean, I love that now there either you're finding not you but just in general, like everyone can find that community or they're part of a community that like opens that up to more people, and it's becoming more normalized, which I love.
And I think, JC, that's where the importance comes from: representation, designing inclusive communities, and designing inclusive programming. Because I keep bringing up the meaning of like sense of belonging and shame, because that's a reason why people often don't step into spaces, because there's either fear or shame, and they stay in places because they feel like they belong. And I often think about that, and you think I shared with you that I found safety in the outdoors early on as a child, and I think about at the time, white, cis, able-bodied at the time, and you wouldn't be able to assume my sexual identity at the time. And so I didn't have to navigate the spaces differently. And I think as I become a person with a disability, it has become different. It has. And the more that I've, especially, I came out after college and I've started loving myself fully and wanting to feel like I can be 100% authentically me, but there's still this sense of fear that, for me, one, there's a side of me living with a disability. Is it physically accessible? B, am I just going to become someone's inspiration on the mountain? Or C, am I going to belong because of my disability? And at the same time, with the intersectionality of being like openly gay, is I want to be open about who I am and have a conversation about my identity. But am I going to be accepted based upon the conversation I'm having with the person I'm in front of me. And I think that's like, it's such an interesting thing because people are afraid of accessing certain spaces because they're just afraid that they're not going to belong. And they don't see someone that looks like them. Because once you see someone that looks like you get that first sense that you're going to belong there because you see it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, they're there. I'm welcome there. And so it starts that ripple effect. And that's why representation, in my opinion, more than anything, matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's one of the things that I love about social media. Like, social media can be a cluster, right? But at the same time, it's a great place to be able to be represented. And like, that's how kind of we started, with an Instagram showing LGBTQ plus people being in the outdoors. And I couldn't agree more that, representation is a critical part of it, visibility. So definitely.
Yeah. I will say, Justin, to your comment, like, we always kind of like say like social media is so toxic, but I just think about how like I'm looking for genuine connection, friendships, and just meaningful connections, and I'm not the only one. Like, there are so many people out there who are looking for genuine connections.
Yeah. I think it just all depends on your intent and how you use it. If you want to live in a toxic world, then you can find toxic content and perpetuate it. If you want to enact change and growth and look for beauty in the world, then you can do the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Before we move on, I will say, Kyle, with what you were saying before, in the very beginning, what resonated to me was pretty much like with your experience, because I truly believe you're not defined by the things that happen to you. You're defined by what you do with the things that happen to you. And that's really like your opportunity to show what you can do to people. And it's a way to inspire people to say, you know what, I went through this really tough time, but look how I just kind of bounced back and became a better person. So I feel like even when bad things do happen to you, those are the opportunities that come to your life that say, what are you going to do about it? And when you come out on top of that, you come out stronger. People respect you for the things that you've done way more than if those bad things didn't happen to you. So like, in some ways, you kind of have to appreciate that those opportunities came, even if they were tough and heartbreaking and all those things that could have like just it's a challenge. I don't know. I love that because I feel like in the fitness space, I mean, anywhere, people go through that kind of journey, and it's not just in the fitness space. Like, you go through that in life, like in, having financial trouble, or it could be about your love life or anything like that, your career. And they're all opportunities. And I just love talking about this stuff.
Yeah. So I think, JC, like, one of the things that I've leaned into is when we change our relationship with the pain and the hardships we've gone through, we can develop an entire new perspective of how we view them. So it's a relationship with it. So I think about, to be honest with you, I look back on the 29 years of my life. Sometimes I'm like, why the fuck did I have to go through what I went through? And I think all of us can look back on our 29 years and identify moments in our life that were moments that we think that they were unfortunate and they do suck. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to honor that. I think it's because like one of the things that I've done that's not healthy is for me is like the toxic positivity. Like, oh, like I've been through this. Look at me. I've made it. I've overcome this. And you don't want to talk
Yeah.
about the low moments, that how much it sucked. And I think it's honoring the moments and the experience and the challenges and the setbacks for what it is. But what I can look at is being raised by a community of, at the time, were strangers that became friends and deep family members, allowed me, I could meet anyone, literally anybody, and we could probably become best friends in the matter of 5 minutes, because what I learned was 2 key traits: genuine curiosity and genuine compassion. And because when I was raised, I mean, y'all, I was raised by multiple families, multiple individuals that all they did was show up with curiosity and compassion, not judgment, not shame, just curiosity and compassion. And I belonged, and I felt like I literally belonged because of those
That's
2
great.
things. And I think, after, when I being diagnosed with bone cancer, for me, I literally thought that was the end of my story. Because, on October 14th, 2008, being diagnosed with a high-grade form of osteosarcoma and being given less than 20% chance to live, that's when I accepted, okay, my life is over. And so my relationship through that process of honoring, okay, this might be my end. How do I want to live my last days? That's where my relationship
Yeah.
with that started changing. Because I think we have these relationships with moments in life. We'll have defining moments in our life. We lose a partner. We lose a family member. We were potentially abandoned. We lost a physical part of our body. We have a moment in that time where we have to define what our relationship is with that certain circumstance. And, when I was diagnosed with cancer, it was my relationship with how do I want to live my last days more than anything? Because I potentially have a timeline now. I have a timeline between now and when, for us, we don't know what the afterlife is like. And so what I do know is the present moment. And so how am I going to live in the present moment? And when I was in the hospital, I became best friends with 9 other kids. And so when you're in the children's hospital, especially if you're diagnosed with a long-term illness or a long-term disease, you're going to end up spending weeks, months, years in the hospital. And so your friends and your family become the other kids in the hospital, the other families, your doctors, your nurses. And so there was 9 kids that became my best friends. They're the ones that I would stay up till 2 a.m. playing FIFA with while hooked up to IV pole and receiving chemo. It was the ones that I celebrated New Year's with. It was the ones that I celebrated my birthdays with. And those 9 really taught me a lot about how I show up in the world, how I use my gifts and my talents. But unfortunately, those 9 didn't make it. And it fucking sucks. I live with that every day. And there's not a single day that I don't think about one of them. And I think about the moments when shit hits the fan. I'm frustrated with work. I'm frustrated with a training session. I'm frustrated with an opportunity or a relationship, or just, like, to be honest with you, just bullshit human things. And I know that they wish they could have those experiences.
Yeah.
They would. They would love to have those experiences because that's what makes us human. And so for me, it was that relationship in that period where I didn't realize the lessons I learned from those past 9 until the past few years. And I think I'm still unpacking lessons that I'm applying to my life from those 9. But for me, I look at, if I'm going to do anything with this life, because I mentioned early on in the podcast, is we all want a purpose for things. And so for me, my purpose is to honor them and their legacy, and how they show up in the world. And one of those is to be unapologetically me and to show up with love, to show up with compassion, to show up with curiosity, to show up with adventure. Because when I wake up one day, if someone asks me, hey, do you want to go do this? I'm going to say yes. Because I still remember the 14-year-old me that didn't know if I would ever leave the doors of the hospital.
Wow. If that's not a challenge, I don't know what is. Definitely makes you think, for sure.
You know, Justin, I think like when I drop that, it's heavy. It is.
Yeah.
Because I think there's, you know, Justin, you mentioned a comment earlier that kind of struck me a little bit is you've lived a good life and that's okay. I think sometimes you have individuals, you listen to them and they're like, oh my God, they've been through so much. So what should I feel? Why should I feel sad about A, B, and C? Y'all, there's not a spectrum of adversity. I don't believe one person's challenges or circumstances are worse or better than others. We all face shit. And we just have to honor that. And that's just what makes us human. And I think once we start just honoring just who we are as people, especially the things we've gone through, the privileges we had, it's either the hardship we've gone through, how do we use that for good? And the privileges we've had, how do we use that for good? And I know that seems like it's just like, it's such a simple thing. Like we have a finite time here on earth. And so we might as well make this place a place where everyone feels like they belong and they can thrive during the period of time they're here. You know, I have the opportunity right now. I partner with Cotopaxi. And Cotopaxi has like the mission of doing good and really using their business to do good. And it was probably one of the first times this week they ended up sharing a piece of content that was really elevating the LGBT community. And it was, 5 tips for why, 5 tips for how LGBTQ individuals can be safe while traveling. And it was this beautiful queer couple that were sharing their stories. And I've been struggling a lot recently around especially our community, that if anything is publicized around individuals feeling like they can belong in the outdoors, there's this immediate attack. Because I look back on my life and all we want to do is belong. And we have to design spaces and media where people can see that they do belong. And it's hard. Like, I will tell you, like, I don't know why the past, I think I do know why, and I think there's a lot to unpack there, but like, it's been hurting more. It's been hurting a lot when you where you see brands posting about inclusivity, about the LGBTQ, and there's this immediate shame. And I wonder, like, I'm gonna throw this out there. When you post a story about a person with a disability, it's an inspiration. It's inspiring. You see this person overcoming the odds. But what if you saw that person about a story that was talking about being gay and disabled? You see one is shame. They don't belong. Let's not talk about that. We can't talk about being gay. But we want the person with the disability to be our inspiration. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
Yeah.
One's not talked on the Bible.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
And like, JC, let's talk about this, because I literally, with one of my best friends before this, like, that is to the core. It is like, as someone that grew up in the church, that, like, I look at Jesus as a good example, as someone that, like, regardless of what you believe in, let's get to the core of why it exists. But like, loving thy neighbor, loving the broken, loving the disabled, loving the sinful. Like, I'm like, as we're talking about this tonight, like I'm still unpacking this. Like it sucks. There's a part of me that I see in media that is put on a pedestal as an inspiration. Then there's a part of me that's anything that's shared that is fucking shamed. That you're not, sorry. We can't talk about this. We can't talk about individuals that identify as gay, queer, trans, non-binary. But oh my God, look at that story of the disabled person. That makes me feel so good. Come on.
Yeah. What do you think feeds the shame?
It's fear. It's fear that you're not going to belong. And I think that shame, so I like keep coming back to this core sense of belonging. So you think about religion, and there's parts of the Bible that was written later on, that was written differently, that say that because of being an individual that's gay, it is a sin, and sin is correlated to the afterlife and not going to heaven. And I think so many of us fear not belonging, and we fear what the life is after here on earth. And I know that's deep. Like that's profound and deep. And so many of us are growing up with, okay, if we accept and love Jesus Christ and we follow these rules, we will go to heaven and we will have life forever. And unfortunately, if you don't follow these rules and you don't identify as these key things, you're not going to be welcomed. That's all it comes down to, is shame and sense of belonging. And I think where so many individuals don't feel like they belong is because there was shame around their identities. Whether you're a person of color, whether you're a person that lives with a disability, you're a person that identifies as gay, all you want to do is belong. And there was moments over society, whether it's through media, it's through programming, it's through physical designs, that prevented you from feeling like you can belong and thrive. And that's what it comes down to, the core of it.
From my perspective, this is just Patrick. This isn't necessarily LGBT Outdoors or any other entity. But going back to your comment a second ago, like the shame when it comes to religion and the afterlife, that is not biblical. That shame is not from God. Like that shame is originating from the people and certain particular religious institutions.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to just note that like biblically, God calls us to be his family, but exclusion is not part of that design. Condemnation and judgment is all human.
It's the institutionalized version of religion.
Yeah.
Right.
It is not to the core. And I'm curious from you on this. What do you think when individuals are going on marketing campaigns, Instagram posts, especially brands that are trying to create a space for people to feel like their representation, true, authentic representation of the LGBTQ community, there immediately goes these comments around, you don't belong. There's a fear there. There's a reason why they're saying that. And I just wonder, like, I don't even know.
From the person making the comments?
Yeah, because like, I think we're unpacking something pretty deep. Like you see a person with a disability and everyone will go and comment how inspiring they am. And JC, I've loved it. Like, you said something, you hit home right after I said that, but like someone that is LGBTQ or identifies in that community, immediately that post is filled with hundreds of comments around "you don't belong."
Well, I think the difference that I can see from those two things about like being disabled versus being gay, I think any person, like anyone who, like, I don't know, sees you on social media or any sort of marketing material, they see a disabled person, they're like thinking about themselves, looking at this, they're thinking like, oh, that could happen to me. And it is very inspiring because we can easily understand how that person overcame something and they come out on top. But like culturally, like with how, you know, society has ingrained these ideas of you're a man, you're supposed to be with a woman, all those things, when they see an LGBTQ person, it's kind of like it's shameful, it's disgusting. There's no way that could be me. Why are they promoting that? Because like lack of understanding turns into lack of compassion, because they're never going to know that coming out, that's something gay people have to overcome, like the fear of losing everything you know and everyone you know and everything you have. People don't know that gay people have to go through that as a personal journey, that it is also something to overcome. um I just think, yeah, like it's one thing is celebrated because they can see them when they look at something like that, a disabled person, like they can easily think, oh, that could happen to me. And it's so inspiring that that person, you know, like was able to get through that with, you know, and become successful, stronger, all those things. But with like the other thing, it's like, well, there's no way I could be gay. It's a choice, you know, like things like that. Like it's lack of understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, to steal a quote from Star Wars, you know, fear leads to hate. Hate is the path to the dark side. Like, I think,
Yeah.
I think, just not understanding exactly what you said, but also, compassion for somebody with a disability was directly modeled in the Bible. Going back, like a very like picture perfect. This is what Jesus does. And so I think we get that innate compassion, you know, for somebody living with a disability. But love for your queer neighbors, while it is modeled as loving your neighbors, it is not like specifically clearly depicted. And so it's easy to just forget that, oh, you know, they're still my brother or my sister. And, you know, maybe I don't have to love them because, you know, that's not specifically in the Bible. Like, I don't know.
You know, I think what's beautiful about this conversation, because it's heavy.
It is.
And it's a lot. And I think we're so afraid to have these conversations. And I think it's needed because there's conversations is what leads to understanding. And as you mentioned, Patrick, understanding is what leads to compassion. All right, JC, I apologize if you said that. But it's like the understanding is what leads to compassion. And so I think these conversations are helpful because we're all consistently learning and unlearning. That's inevitable. And the world is always evolving. And I think when we honor that we're always learning and unlearning, that's okay. Because through these conversations allows us to gain a new perspective that we wouldn't had otherwise. Because that's why personal stories, and like I think about sometimes we are often afraid to share the vulnerable sides of us, is because shame steps in. And shame steps in and says, you know, by you sharing that is going to be wrong. like you can't share that part of you. And I think when we share parts of us that are all of us, it allows us to develop this new understanding, this new perspective around how we navigate or experience the world, because there's 90% sure there's others that are also experiencing those challenges, because they've often been afraid to talk about that part of themselves, but they see themselves in you. And that's why, I've been really been talking about this like intersectionality of living with a disability and being gay, because how I navigate our community is vastly different. It is. You walk into, especially just the culture, the LGBTQ culture is different than how cis individuals navigate the world. And so I think as living with a disability, how I build relationships, how I build friendships, but it's important to have these conversations. I'm glad we're having it tonight, because it's hard and it's heavy. But I think when we leave here, I hope we leave here just thinking a little bit more. We question things a little bit different than we would have, because I can feel it right now. Like we've said a lot of deep shit in a very short amount of time. But that's the power of like when you just show up and you just want to listen to one another, and you want to be able to have a space where you can be so open about who you are.
It's compassion and curiosity, like you said.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love that so much. I would love to be able to kind of roll this over into, your advocacy side for the LGBTQ plus, especially athletes side, and kind of learn more about what you're doing with that, what we can do with that, what your listeners can do with that. Even, like we even get asked from time to time, like, do you have anything specifically for disabled people? And honestly, right now we don't. We do have some events that disabled people, depending on the disability, are welcome to come to and can come to, but it's something that we're trying to learn more about so that we can be, better advocates and be able to make the outdoors more accessible as well. So
it's this weird intersectionality, like being white, cis, and being, for me, for the most part, like straight presenting. Like I don't experience a lot of like the discrimination that the LGBTQ community has. And it's interesting as I enter my adulthood, but at the same time, within its own community, I feel excluded. Not because of it's because of my physical ability. It's just like I'm in this, and I'll be honest with you, like, tonight I don't know if I was ready for it, because I've been unpacking this. Because, I become this advocate for the disabled community. And you asked this question, Patrick. I mean, Justin made this comment about both. I'm trying to figure that out. I recently just put myself out there. So I've been on Tinder and Hinge and Grindr, and there was such a period of time where I wouldn't share the part of me that's disabled. Because, to be honest with you, there was ableism that was rooted in me. The fucking shame from ableism. And I was so afraid. And then it was interesting because, I would share parts of me, like Instagram had all of me. So if you like went to take the efforts to get to the Instagram profile, you see 100% of me. For LGBTQ, and for me to find a potential partner or friends, I was afraid to share that part of my disability. And it was probably about 7-8 months ago. I had to change that relationship with it, and I just had to share all of me. And I was afraid. I really was, because I was afraid I just wasn't going to be accepted and I wasn't going to belong because of my disability. And after that happened, there was actually a couple of guys that messaged me. And as you all know, especially on Grindr, there's individuals, and I was in that place too, of just like a lot of hurt, where I wouldn't share my picture and I would have a blank profile because I was afraid. More than anything else, I was afraid that I wouldn't be accepted or I'd belong. And there was 2 guys that messaged me and just said, thank you. Thank you for showing yourself, because I'm an amputee and I'm afraid. And I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, I care about this community a lot because, well, yes, I come from a place of privilege of who I am as a white cis man. I also understand like how hard it hurts to not feel like you belong. And I'm figuring out, how do I advocate for both? Because, you know, it's this beautiful intersectionality, because for the disabled community, I can advocate for access to better equipment, better technology, better programming. And I think about all of these barriers to access that exist for disabled folk. And I'm advocating on things that we can all do to change, to create access. Then I think about the side of me, and it's welcomed. Like, y'all, it's welcomed by everyone. There's not a single person that doesn't want to say, absolutely, let's create access for people living with disabilities. But what about people that identify as gay? It's not accepted by everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's been this beautiful journey right now that I know it matters. And I have to, because I know there's individuals out there that don't feel like they belong. And that's fucked up. That is fucked up.
Yeah.
That I think all of us just want to be loved. All of us just want to be welcomed. All of us just want to find a partner. All of us just want, like, it all goes down the course. Like, you just want to feel like you're a part of a community and you're connected to other individuals. And I think, how do we deconstruct ableism? How do we deconstruct homophobia? And I think more than ever, it's representation. And I'm trying to figure out, like, it's one thing to talk about it, but how do we do more than talk about it? And I think, you know, you all mentioned earlier around your spaces for disabled folk. I'm excited to partner. Like, how do we create the spaces to be more physically accessible? Because, hate to say it, but like 1 in 4 individuals identify as gay. And so there happens to be a lot of us that are probably gay and it's disabled. And so how do we marry the beautiful, how do we create spaces to be accessible, but also just unapologetically welcoming for who you are, no matter how you identify?
You just said it. I mean, I think there are parts of me that I know if I present it to the world, people will accept it immediately, from my understanding. I also know that there are parts of me that I fear if I were to present that to the world, I would be rejected and ostracized and feel like you shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have expressed that. And each one of us has those things. And I've gotten in situations where in my head, I think these are the traits, these are the parts of me that I need to amplify, and that's how I'm going to be accepted. That's how I'm going to find my people. I've learned lately that when you just lay it all out, that's when I feel like I've been the most successful, or that's where I've gained a lot of recognition, respect. Like when you're just unapologetic with every single piece of who you are. When you're laying it out, taking the risk, and also understanding you don't need to please every single person. There's always someone there who's going to be looking for something that they're not going to like about you. That's just the reality of it. But the goal is not to be liked by everyone. The goal is for those people, like the ones who like thank you for showing yourself. Those are the ones that are worth having those connections and reaching.
No, I was just gonna say, Patrick, that's why spaces like this matters. Like, we have to design spaces where you may not see individuals that look like you in your hometown, but there are spaces that are designed for you to belong. And as we work, especially for the people living with disabilities, ideally you can go to any mountain, you can go to any trail, you can enter any sort of outdoor program, and it's accessible to you. But there are spaces that people with disabilities do belong, and we have to elevate those. Because as we work towards this universal inclusivity, that's why, especially in the outdoors, especially being an individual that identifies as gay or LGBTQ plus, that there's spaces like this that matters. Because you may not have it at home, but you belong here. No matter your, and also now, like us telling the story and sharing and sharing it, like no matter your physical ability, you're welcomed here. And if you live with a disability and you identify in our community, you're here and you're welcome. And deep down, like that's what our goal is and our mission is, to design spaces. And I've been thinking about this more than ever. It's like, as much as it's easy to worry about or care about the individuals and the spaces and the organizations that are excluding individuals, let's focus on the things that are doing that. And I think that's what, the three of you and like your board and your team are creating, a space where everyone in our community can and do belong.
I'm hoping, and this is going to make Justin's head explode, but like I would love to get to a point where LGBT Outdoors can just disband, because like it's no longer in the future. Like it's just not necessary. I don't necessarily see that happening in my lifetime, but at the same time, I didn't see being able to legally marry a man.
Yeah.
Like when I came out at 16, I didn't think that was ever going to happen. So stranger things have happened. I mean, at that point, hey, mission accomplished.
I think that is, and that should be our mission. Our mission should be to disband, to the point where everyone does belong. I'll close out with my part. Is I had the same conversation with a friend of mine earlier today around, why do we as people with disabilities have to exploit ourselves to fight for access to proper health care? When will it come to the point where spaces and healthcare and programming is accessible to everyone? It's second nature. It's, if I'm designing a space, I'm designing programming, I'm creating a community, I immediately think, okay, is this accessible to everybody? And no matter who walks in, rolls in, crutches in the door, those individuals know that they belong there. And it was accessible, and they see individuals that look like them, that embody their identities in that space. Until then, we keep challenging it, and we create the spaces for them.
Let's do it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like this episode did not go how I was thinking it was.
Y'all saying, but this is what happens when you have a heart-to-heart with your. This is what happens when you have a heart-to-heart with your best friend right before recording of a podcast, and you're like, "Holy fuck, my heart is swollen." And I think at the same time too, it's, when you're deconstructing a lot of shit in your mind and your heart, you don't know what's going to come out. And thank you all for creating a space for us to have this dialogue and have this conversation. And for those that are listening, welcome to my mind and heart. It kind of seems like chaos. It's a little bit of all over the place. And I think we eventually land the plane.
You might feel like it's chaos. If it is, it's a beautiful chaos. Yeah. I gotta say that.
I have
getting
so many takeaways.
Right? I might have to listen to this episode like 4 or 5 times once we get it done, just because there's so much that I'm like over here, like even like taking notes and jotting things down.
Yeah,
it's just so good.
Mine is compassion and curiosity. So,
Yeah.
Justin, next time you're sassy on me, CNC. Tell me I'm pretty. Tell me I'm pretty, and ask me about my day.
Yes. Also, I love like for our friends.
I'll get a tattoo of that for you, JC, so that every time
CNC.
CNC. JC coming in hot with that shit. It's so funny. Y'all, I wish you were listening to this right before. I love how we're ending this, where we started this and ended this with the same energy.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I do want to throw out a couple things, or let you throw out a couple things really before we do get off. So if people are listening to this, like, really, what can some of us abled people in the LGBTQ community do for our disabled friends that want to get out there? What resources might be available as well for them, so that anybody listening, whether they're able-bodied or not, can work towards making it a better outdoors for everyone.
Yeah, because I think, Justin, what we're doing more than ever is I mentioned around this learning and unlearning, and I know this is probably, I don't know if this is kosher. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'll give you an example. Right now, you said the word able-bodied. I think it's us relearning language matters, and we're all able, and there's nothing wrong with being disabled. I live with a disability, and you live without a disability, and that's okay. And so I think the first step is educating ourselves around the language, because language allows you to feel like you belong. So taking the time just to learn and understand the different aspects of how people with disabilities navigate the world, just taking your own education. 2 is, if you're an individual that you have the opportunity to design spaces or design programming, keeping in mind people with disabilities, and creating those spaces to think about, do they belong? And third, bringing with people with disabilities to the table to build alongside you, because those individuals can help you to create this space. Because I think more than ever, we have the desire, we're learning and unlearning. I think even with our own community, terminology does matter. And sometimes we've also, as individuals, used the wrong terminology within our own community, because there might be individuals in our community that don't identify with that term. And so just being curious and wanting to learn. And so I think, that would be some of these key tips. I think there's lots of organizations that exist out there right now that are doing a lot of work in the disability advocacy space. But if you have the opportunity to design spaces or design programming, invite people that live with a disability to be a part of creating it alongside you, because that's the best thing to do. Especially whether you're trying to identify programming for queer folk, invite the queer folk to the table to design the programming. And that's the same thing with people living with disabilities.
Love that.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. It has been a roller coaster of emotions with you, Kyle. But it has been a privilege and an honor to be able to have you share with our community and our listeners. And I know as LGBT Outdoor as a whole, we're just very grateful for your time and to be able to share with our listeners tonight. Patrick, JC, you have anything that you want to throw out there in wrapping up?
I mean, I couldn't even dream to put a cherry on top of this, but I do want, Kyle, genuinely, you had a conversation before coming in, but you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, and just to have your heart open to wherever this goes. And I think that this was an incredibly powerful and productive conversation. I've learned a lot, and I am really, really grateful for this time. So thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
I don't know what else to say. I appreciate you sharing. I think as far as our conversations go, it definitely has gone into places in topics that, we've never dug this deep into things. And so I appreciate that we had that opportunity through you, Kyle. So thanks.
Thanks, JC. And I just hope tonight, we continue these types of conversations. We're often afraid because it makes us, to be honest with you, it makes us uncomfortable.
Sure.
And
That's how you grow.
Yeah, come on. And I hope we can have more of these types of conversations, because I know from this I'm going to learn a lot as well.
Amazing.
CNC, Justin.
Amazing.
CNC, baby.
Oh, I love that so much. All right. Kyle, how can people, well, first of all, I just want to say too, I'm really glad that we connected on multiple levels, but we're going to stay in touch and figure out what LGBT Outdoors can do specifically to be able to help with this. So expect to hear more from me. But and finally closing, I know a lot of our listeners are going to want to be able to check you out, follow you. Where can they learn more about you or follow you on social media?
Yeah, let's stay friends. Just first and last name, easiest way to find me. On all social media at Kyle Stepp, but would love just to be a friend, be a resource, to be an ally together in the community. And so if I can ever be of help or a resource, we're in this together.
Yeah. Count us in. Love that.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. Another episode done for you. I hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed this as much as I have. I know there's a much to unpack in it. So go back and listen to it a couple times. Be sure to rate and review us. We would love to be able to get your thoughts and input on our podcast. Also check out our Patreon. If you're loving what we're doing and you love this podcast, check out the Patreon, become a part of it. You get bonus content there as well. And you can always check out our website for more details, as well as taking the visibility survey at lgbtoutdoors.com. So until next time, get out there. Thank you again for joining us this week. If you have a campfire conversation story you would like to share, please email it to us at info@lgbtoutdoors.com. Follow us on Instagram at lgbtoutdoors and join the community at facebook.com/groups/lgbtoutdoors. Become a partner by joining our Patreon, where you'll gain access to monthly bonus stories and exclusive content. For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. For information about LGBT Outdoors, LGBT Outdoor Fest, local chapters, or to sign up for our newsletter, visit lgbtoutdoors.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts.